On this episode of Scratch, we're going to teach you how to make homemade chicken noodle soup. So to start, we're going to take some rotisserie chicken that we just buy at our local store. We have a favorite place that we like to buy it because it's really good and it's actually really cheap. We're going to pull all the skin off. And we're just going to debone the chicken, which is a really simple process. It works better if it's not too hot so you don't burn your hands. And it also works better if you've left it out at room temperature for about an hour, so the meat's just easier to work with. So we're going to pull all the breast meat off. We're going to pull all the meat off of the drumsticks. And we're going to pull any meat off of the, off the back side of it. I have my chicken upside down, but it's really easy. You can separate it with your hands. I don't put it in too small a pieces just yet because I do that later on once we get everything rolling for the soup. So we're going to separate this off here.
This part grosses me out, so I let him do it.
And we're going to save all the bones. When you, if you refrigerate your chicken, you're going to find there's a little jelly substance in the bottom of your pan or whatever. Looks kind of like this. So that jelly stuff is actually what's going to make your homemade broth really yummy. So you're going to want to save that and put it in your water. And all we're doing, like I said, is we're taking the meat off of the bones. We're going to add this to a pot of boiling water along with our vegetables and some spices.
So about the vegetables and spices, you can add whatever you want. It's really easy when you're making soup to kind of throw whatever's in your fridge in the soup. For this recipe, we typically put celery, carrots, and onions in. We've done it with broccoli, we've done it with, you could do it with potatoes, you can add other things in. This is kind of our favorite. When you're making broth, you don't need to cut your pieces really, really small because you're really throwing the stuff out at the end. So with just these small carrots, I just leave them as they are. With an onion, you could just cut it down into kind of 8. It doesn't need to be really small.
You're still going to get all that flavor, and it's just going to be easier to separate out later if you do it that way.
Yeah, you don't want little tiny pieces for your broth. We're going to add in a little bit of salt and pepper, and then just some fresh garlic. I'm going to cut a little bit. You don't even need to cut the ends of the stalks and throw them away for celery. I just like to cut them up so they fit better in the pot, but everything is going to go in. It makes a really great broth, and the key to your broth is the longer that it boils and it simmers, the more flavor gets into it. At some point, we're going to show you that we're going to take all of the bones and everything out, and you're going to have an amazing stock.
And so this is one that a lot of times we'll take in the morning, especially after Thanksgiving or Christmas if you've had a turkey. It works really good with turkey. Nobody knows what to do with leftover turkey. You make turkey sandwiches, but you can only eat those for so many days. I just put the wrong chicken in the wrong bowl.
My family thinks I'm always the weirdo at the end of family dinners because I always want to take the turkey carcass and all those things home. But it makes amazing stock, and stock freezes really well.
And we actually make both stock and soup and freeze both because you never know when you're going to need them. It's great for winter time if you're sick, or it's great for a quick cheap meal. It doesn't take too long to defrost. You throw it in your freezer and it defrosts within a day. Or sorry, you throw it in your fridge and it defrosts within about a day. And it tastes just like it was freshly made.
Oh, it does. And our kids were sick all Christmas because, yay, that's super fun. But one thing we were able to do is we have frozen chicken noodle soup, so we were able to pull that out.
And you'll notice with this chicken, I'm not actually cutting any of it with a knife. There are a few tendons or sinews or whatever you want to call it. I'm just pulling those off with my hand. Some people don't mind chewy chicken. I can't stand it. I don't like to have gristle and chewy stuff in my chicken. My dogs and my cats will hang out at my feet while we're doing this because they love when I give them chicken off of this. Don't give them the bones. Chicken bones aren't good for pets. They can cause them to choke, I believe.
Yep.
But as you can see, there's lots of chicken off of this one carcass. We can actually make several meals off of this one carcass. You can make a giant pot of soup, or we'll do chicken Caesar salad a lot of times, chicken pot pie. You can make probably, 3 recipes off of one chicken carcass, depending on how chickeny you like your stuff, if that makes sense.
I like stuff really chickeny. So we actually usually just make a huge pot of soup. That's my favorite, and it's, like we said, it's super easy to freeze. These chickens don't cost very much, which is one of the reasons we really like using these. As a family with 3 kids and everybody's running in 1,000 directions, we have sports, we have everything. This is one of the easiest things. You can just grab at the store and go. Like you said, it makes great chicken Caesar salad, makes great soup, super easy. So this is one of my go-to hacks. I would say it's not really from scratch necessarily, but it's a really good hack for home.
And honestly, you can't make this kind of chicken that tastes this good for the price that we buy them at the store.
Yeah, I've actually priced it out. You can't.
You can't. They're just done so well. Pick your favorite chicken and go from there. One thing I will point out, you can also do this in a crock pot. We're going to do ours over the stovetop today. We're going to show you how to do it on the stovetop. This works really good on the crock pot. You'll need to use a little bit less liquid because it doesn't reduce down quite as well as when you're doing it on the stovetop.
And another fun thing, I actually made this in the Instant Pot the other day, and it was really fun. I'm new to that kitchen appliance, but we did make it. It was really fun. I didn't use a rotisserie chicken, but I did use homemade chicken stock because we had it on hand. I've diced up some onion, a medium-sized onion. My family doesn't mind onion. I know some kids are picky. Mine don't get to be picky, so.
And the smaller you can dice it, the less you'll actually be able to taste it. And also the more you cook it, like if you want to simmer your soup longer, it'll be less noticeable. Because I'm not a huge onion fan, and I don't notice it in here.
And the carrots, you just want to cut them small, bite-sized pieces. Our dogs are always grateful when we're cutting carrots. I can hear them coming.
Come over now and have some carrots. They know what's going on.
So again, just small pieces. This summer we actually had a really nice garden, and we went in a huge garden with 4 or 5 other families.
Yeah.
And we had some really nice garden carrots. These are not those, but we
had
did.
an entire wheelbarrow full of carrots that we had to pull out all kind of in one day.
We did, but it was really fun. I'm not a gardener, but I like the taste of it all.
So these are not from our garden. We ended up freezing all those. We diced them up and froze them. These are just baby carrots, but you can use fresh carrots and cut them as small as you like.
So with the celery, you just want to cut off the ends. You don't need those. Sometimes, especially with kids, they don't always love big pieces of green food. You know, sometimes you have to kind of hide those vegetables from the kids and the husbands.
I actually hate celery, but celery's a must for me in chicken noodle soup. I think it adds a lot of flavor. I like the flavor that it adds, and you'll see in our spices that we're going to add. I actually use celery salt. It's one of my favorite things to put in. Side tip, celery salt makes canned tomato soup taste fabulous. I don't use it on homemade tomato soup, but canned tomato soup, I absolutely love it in.
Yeah, he's funny about that. I thought it was the funniest thing I'd ever heard, but it is actually really good. Okay, and then you want to just make sure your chicken is bite-sized pieces. You have to be able to get it on your spoon. That's kind of the point of soup, so.
And we like a really hearty soup that's more like a stew than a soup. It's not really brothy. So we actually, you'll see our broth isn't really runny. It's a little bit thicker. We don't thicken the broth, we just have so much stuff in it. Because to me, that's the whole point, that's the whole benefit of soup, is you have all this yummy stuff that goes together in a pot, and the broth is just sort of the vehicle to get it all together.
And if you find that the broth, if you've boiled it all day, it is going to thicken up quite a bit. If you find that it's too strong for you, you just have to add a little bit of water. Yep. If a flavor is off, super easy to change and just add spices too. All right, so we're gonna finish cutting this up and then we'll show you it over in putting it into the soup. We're to the point where we're gonna make the broth. I'm just gonna add my veggies to a bowl so they're easy to take over there. We've got some celery, again roughly cut, not a small chop. And then carrots and onions. And we're gonna take these over and put them in our boiling water.
We're gonna take them with the bones. We're gonna add the bones, we're gonna add all the vegetables and then some spices. We're gonna leave the chicken so we can add it to the soup once we make the soup. So we're gonna turn our burner on to high. You can see the system we have set up. We've got a strainer inside of a pot. It just fits. It works better that way. Then we can just lift it out and all of our broth is left in the bottom of the pot. We're gonna turn our burner on to high. We're gonna add our chicken. Now this isn't the cut chicken. This is the bones, the jelly, the skin, any parts you don't want to eat or that you think will make good flavor. You're gonna add that into there.
If you were me, it would just be the gross parts. But now we're gonna add carrot, celery, and onion for some flavor. And then I like to add some fresh garlic, as well as just some salt and pepper. You're going to salt and pepper the soup as well, but I like to do this to the broth.
And so there's about 6 or 8 cups of water in the bottom here. We're just gonna stir that to mix all the spices around, get all your vegetables covered with water, and it's gonna simmer. You can let it simmer for an hour, you can let it simmer for 4 or 5 hours, and you would just add more water as the level goes down. And when this is done, it'll be a nice golden brown broth. So you can see it's turned a nice kind of yellowy brown color. We're just going to take this out and strain that. And you can see our broth there. We're going to turn our stove off. Nice rich color of our broth. And now we can start cutting up our vegetables and our chicken that we're going to use for our homemade chicken noodle soup. So you can see now that we've cut up all this chicken, there's a lot of chicken that came off that one chicken breast, and so we can separate it out into a couple different portions. This works really good. You can pan fry it quick to make it a little bit crispier. It works really good on chicken Caesar salads. We're gonna put, like I said, about 1/3 to 1/2 of this in our chicken soup. The same chicken broth is what we use for chicken and dumplings, which is one of my favorite dishes. This is also good for, what did I say, chicken salad,
Chicken pot pie, barbecue chicken pizza.
Oh,
That's a
throw
good
some
one.
barbecue sauce on it.
And if wraps, like we make chicken Caesar wraps for our kids. Sometimes, my kids love Caesar salad, but sometimes kids aren't super excited about salad. Throw it in a wrap, it's less green, they'll eat it.
And it's nice because it's not a processed lunch meat, which lunch meat's fine, but it's not a processed lunch meat, and the flavor that this gives in a sandwich or a wrap is just really cool. Mix it with the right mustards or whatever, and it turns out really good.
Yep.
So we're gonna add all this to our stock pot that we have going over on the stove. So come with us while we add that over there. So we're gonna add all of our vegetables. You can see our chicken broth is just simmering. You can either add it to cold broth, or you can add it in a pre-simmering broth. And because this is gonna cook a little bit longer, it doesn't matter what order you add your vegetables. If you like crispier vegetables, you add them in a little bit later, or you just don't simmer it as long. Like we said before, this is a dish that we'll cook throughout the day and just leave on the stove, and then when we're ready to eat it, it's ready to go.
Now we're gonna just add the chopped up chicken that I cut up earlier. Get all that good stuff out of there.
And this is only about half of what we cut up, not even maybe.
And for spices, we keep it pretty simple. This is just salt and pepper, some parsley. I like the look of the parsley as well as the flavor. It's nice to see that in there. We've got a little bit of celery salt because of Brian, and then a little bit of poultry seasoning, which just complements the chicken.
One thing that's fun to do, if you like it a little bit spicy, you can add cayenne pepper to it. You can add any other vegetables, you can add any other spices that you want. It's all about making it something that's going to taste good for you. If you're not sure what spices you want to add, just take a little bit of the broth out, add a touch of that spice, and see what it tastes like, and see if you like that flavor profile, because it could be something that you really like. We like to keep it really simple. Some people like a lot of depth in their flavors. We just keep it simple, and this is gonna simmer on the stove until we're ready. And so we'll come back and we'll add in some noodles about 20 minutes before we're ready to serve. So we're gonna add some noodles in. We're about 20 minutes away from being ready to eat. We're just gonna add about a handful-ish of noodles. Add it more or less, depending on how thick you like your soup. So you can see it's a nice rolling boil. All those colors look really nice in there. One other spice I thought of that you could add is dill. Dill is a really unique herb that we've been experimenting with lately. We've got a new dill coleslaw that's really yummy. We're gonna experiment with putting that on a pulled pork sandwich. So we're gonna let the noodles cook in here until they're done, which is about 10 or 15 minutes. And then we let it cool just a couple minutes before we serve it. And that's as easy as it is. So our chicken noodle soup recipe calls for 1 rotisserie chicken, boned, calls for 6 to 8 cups of water, onion, garlic, celery, carrots, salt, pepper, parsley to taste for the broth. Once that's all combined and you've actually got your broth done, for the chicken soup, we're going to use 1 to 2 cups of cooked diced chicken, either the chicken you pulled off a rotisserie chicken or pre-cooked chicken you have at home. We're going to use about a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of pepper, a teaspoon of parsley, a teaspoon of celery salt if you like celery salt. You could add about 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon of cayenne pepper if you want a soup that's a little bit more spicy. You're going to use about 1 cup of cut carrots, a medium onion diced up as small as you like, celery cut up as small as you like, 3 to 4 stalks depending on how flavorful you like it. If you need any other spices such as garlic or onion powder, you could use that. You could also put sage or poultry seasoning in if you like it to taste. And then we're going to use about 2 cups of dried noodles, either egg noodles or macaroni noodles.
A great side for lots of meals, including the chicken noodle soup that we just made, are breadsticks. Super quick and easy to make. Sometimes you just need to practice making them a few times. Bread can be a little bit finicky if you've never made it, but this is a really good starter recipe. So first I put 1.5 cups of hot water into my bowl. Part of the problem with bread is that you can kill the yeast. I actually like my water fairly hot. I haven't killed yeast in a really long time, so a little hotter than you might anticipate. So there's 1.5 cups of hot water, and I'm gonna add 2 tablespoons of sugar, a tablespoon of salt, and then this is important that your butter is softened. Otherwise, it's just not going to mix into your dough well. So we have 2 tablespoons of softened butter, and I'm just gonna start mixing that and let it combine a little bit. And then you're just gonna add about 2 cups of flour to this recipe and kind of let it start going. This is a recipe where I will tell you how much flour to add in, and if you've ever made bread before, you would know that I can tell you every time and it will be different. Bread is just so funny that way. So this is 1.5 cups, 1 more, we'll get about 2 cups, and we're gonna let this mix and mix just a little bit so we can get that butter incorporated and let it go. So it's starting to incorporate, it looks really good. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna add about 1 tablespoon of yeast. This is a quick rise yeast. The beauty of using a quick rise yeast versus a regular yeast is you skip one of the steps of rising. So I like to keep this on hand, and another tip is yeast can freeze. So you can buy the big packages at your big wholesale stores, and you can just keep it in the freezer. So you're gonna incorporate your yeast, and then you just start putting flour in until it starts to pull away from the sides of your bowl. Again, the amount of flour will vary. Some recipes call for bread flour. I personally always use all-purpose flour. I haven't found a huge difference. I might be making an error there, but I haven't found a huge difference. I like to use all-purpose flour. Another note that you're gonna make on your mixer like this, make sure you're using your bread paddle, otherwise it won't work. And I like to turn it up just to the 2nd notch. I find that it just needs it a little bit better. I'm gonna continue adding flour until it starts to pull away from the sides of the bowl and make its own ball of dough. You can see our dough is perfect. It rose, it's just exactly how I want it. I like to spray my counter with just a little bit of cooking spray. And I'll show you my little handy cutter here in a minute. This is perfect dough. You don't want to handle the dough too much, because when you do that, it takes all the air bubbles out of it, and then you don't get those nice, big fluffy breadsticks. This little handy cutter, I think I might have got at a dollar store. It's awesome. And I'm just gonna cut my dough and then just roll it into breadsticks. You just wanna work it well in your hand. My kids love helping with this part. This is probably their favorite part. And then you just lay them out. They will rise and they will shrink a little bit once you cut them. So you want to make even-ish pieces of breadsticks. Mine are always different sizes. It's true. You could get really precise and measure them if you so desired, but I don't desire that. I kind of like how they're all different. So you're just going to keep doing this. Dough is fun, and a lot of people are scared of bread. There's really no reason to be scared. I said it can be finicky, but it's worth the work. Bread makers are great in a pinch, but learning how to make your own bread, I don't know, there's just something homey about that. It reminds me of growing up with my mom making bread. We always learned how to make amazing cinnamon buns, which we should definitely teach you guys all about. Yeah, we're just gonna do this quick. See, that one's a little bit thinner. You kind of want them the same thickness, because if they're not going to cook evenly. So I'm a mess today. They're all different sizes. Okay, it's more like yeah, that's a good one. You can do more than one pan if you have a convection oven. If you don't, you can just switch them halfway through in your oven. Okay, so these have risen nicely, and we're just gonna put that there. So what you're going to do is you're going to cover them now with a warm towel and let them rise again for about another half an hour. And then we will put them in the oven.
So in this episode, we've shown you how to take chicken from on the bone, rotisserie chicken, bone it, and make it into this lovely soup. It's now ready. The noodles are the perfect consistency, and we've actually paired a nice breadstick with the soup because I love bread in my soup. I'm gonna get a little bite of it there. That's so good.
I just like carbs.